The NFL in the 2000s produced the birth of an all-time dynasty, along with possibly the greatest quarterback rivalry the league has ever seen. Some teams struggled to move on from legends. Elsewhere, a Hall of Fame changing of the guard took place. If there's one thing this decade should be remembered for, it's that it generated some of the best games in the biggest moments. This is the history of the 2000s NFL. At the turn of the century, one quarterback came out of nowhere to win a Super Bowl, and another quarterback, who everyone expected to win a Super Bowl, called it a career without ever doing so. Dan Marino would be remembered as a statistical anomaly and one of the most prolific passers the league had ever seen. Later that offseason, Steve Young would also retire. The year 2000 marked the end of an era, as Joe Montana, Jim Kelly, John Elway, and now Marino and Young had all stepped away. Nonetheless, Marino's retirement wouldn't be the only major shakeup in the AFC East. Bill Parcells stepped down as Jets head coach, with Bill Belichick lined up to take over. Belichick was a hot head coaching candidate once again, despite going 36-44 as Browns head coach in the 90s. However, with the death of Jets owner Leon Hess, there was an aura of uncertainty about who he would be working for. So in a press conference out of left field, Belichick announced his resignation on the day he was set to be introduced as head coach. A few weeks later, the Patriots sent the Jets a first-round pick in exchange for Belichick's contractual rights. A reversal of the Parcells-Jets hiring just a few years earlier. Patriots owner Robert Kraft granted Belichick GM powers, and in his first NFL draft he selected quarterback Tom Brady under the recommendation of quarterbacks coach Dick Rehbein. At the time, Rehbein told his wife that they got the next Joe Montana. A curious thing to say with the team already rostering Pro Bowl quarterback Drew Bledsoe along with big arm backup Michael Bishop. But when Brady met Robert Kraft for the first time, he told him, "I'm the best decision this organization has ever made." That year, though, Brady threw just 3 passes and the Patriots went 5-11. Meanwhile, the Jets, with Al Groh as head coach, directed a 5-1 start to their season, including a win over the Patriots. Then, in what looked like a battle for the division, they matched up with the Dolphins on Monday Night Football. That night, Miami had their way with the Jets. That is, until the fourth quarter, where the Jets dropped 23 unanswered points. The score was then tied at 30 with under 4 minutes to go, and each team exchanged touchdowns to send it to OT. Dolphins get the ball to start overtime. Quarterback Jay Fiedler gets picked off by Marcus Coleman, but Thurman Thomas forces the fumble and Miami recovers. Later in the drive, though, Coleman would get another INT, and that would set up the Jets' game-winning field goal. With such a swing of events, the game would become known as the Monday Night Miracle. Another memorable game came on Monday night between the Vikings and Packers. In overtime, Brett Favre threw up an almost interception, but Antonio Freeman somehow caught it rolling on the ground and ran into the end zone. The play made Al Michaels famously say, "He did what?" In Baltimore, the Ravens constructed a suffocating defense. Sam Adams and all-time character Tony Siragusa anchored the D-line, with Rob Burnett on the edge. Playing behind them, you had 2 Hall of Famers in Ray Lewis and Rod Woodson, who was leading a secondary with future All-Pro Chris McAllister. Lewis won Defensive Player of the Year and is remembered as one of the most passionate leaders the league has ever seen. This unit's physicality was unmatched. The confidence was unparalleled. There was maybe no greater example than when the team played the Bengals. Running back Corey Dillon gained just 9 yards on 12 carries, then quit the game. Dillon was in the prime of his career and would break the single-game rushing yards record later that season. But against the Ravens defense, he'd had enough. All in all, Baltimore allowed an astounding 10.3 points per game. At one point, the Ravens' offense actually went 5 straight weeks without scoring a touchdown, and the team still made the playoffs. Eventually, things improved to a certain degree with Trent Dilfer taking over the quarterback job. Although Dilfer was nothing special, he could get the job done with the team surrounding him. Rookie running back Jamal Lewis and tight end Shannon Sharp were leaned on heavily. In the wildcard round, Baltimore stifled the Broncos, winning 21-3. For the next round, they were tasked with facing the AFC's top-seeded Titans, who were just 1 yard short of a championship the previous year. Although Dilfer completed just 5 passes that game, one of them went 56 yards to Shannon Sharp. That set up a Jamal Lewis touchdown, and to seal it, Ray Lewis delivered a pick 6. In the conference championship, the defense stepped up yet again, forcing 5 Raiders turnovers and booking a trip to the Super Bowl. For the defending champion Rams, Dick Vermeil had retired and Mike Martz now called the shots for the greatest show on turf. St. Louis retained the league's #1 offense. This time, Marshall Faulk won NFL MVP as he scored 26 touchdowns in 14 games. In spite of that, the Rams' defense dropped to the worst in the league, and the team was eliminated in the wildcard round. The 2 best teams in the NFC that year were the Vikings and Giants. Dante Culpepper had taken over quarterback duties for Minnesota. Although they weren't quite like the '98 squad, they still had one of the best units on that side of the ball, with Randy Moss and Chris Carter still a dominating duo. For New York, Michael Strahan and Jesse Armstead commanded a top 5 defense. Quarterback Kerry Collins had one of the best years of his career, and the Thunder and Lightning backfield featuring Ron Dane and Tiki Barber proved quite effective. So when these two teams met in the NFC Championship, it seemed like it'd be a toss-up. In the end, it was anything but that. Collins threw 5 touchdowns, and the Vikings failed to score a single point. Talk about a momentum generator for the Super Bowl, huh? Questions about Ray Lewis's involvement in a murder about 1 year prior dominated the headlines before Super Bowl 35. Head coach Brian Billick did his best to manage the difficult situation and prep his team for the biggest game of their lives. To begin, both defenses dictated the opening act, but eventually Trent Dilfer broke things open with a perfect ball to Brandon Stokely. The Giants could barely move the ball against the Ravens' stout defense, and at the half, Baltimore led 10-0. In the third, Dwayne Starks intercepted Collins for a pick 6. The Giants mustered up a Ron Dixon kickoff TD, but the Ravens immediately responded with one of their own. Once Jermaine Lewis pulled that off, there was no coming back. At the end of the day, Baltimore's defense held New York's offense to 0 points. The final score, 34-7, as the special teams led up the only TD. For the playoffs as a whole, this unit gave up just 16 points while forcing 12 turnovers. No doubt one of the best defenses to ever take the field. Ray Lewis was awarded Super Bowl MVP, and the Ravens brought a championship to Baltimore in their 5th season post-relocation. With reality TV hitting its peak, the NFL wanted in on the fun. So the defending champion Ravens were featured on HBO's new show, Hard Knocks. That offseason, the Ravens opted for an upgrade on offense, bringing in quarterback Elvis Grbac. Sadly, during training camp though, running back Jamal Lewis suffered an ACL tear. Come week 1, Baltimore's defense picked up right where they left off, but in week 2, there wouldn't be a single NFL game played. Several days after the tragic events of 9/11, smoke rising from the World Trade Center could still be seen from Giants Stadium. That week, NFL Commissioner Paul Tagliabue put the league on pause. During the NFL's actual Week 2 of play, Patriots guard Joe Andruzzi ran out of the tunnel carrying 2 American flags. Andruzzi's brothers were first responders and were honored during the Patriots-Jets game that day. Late in the 4th quarter of that game, Jets linebacker Mo Lewis delivered the hit heard round the world, as he knocked Patriots quarterback Drew Bledsoe out of the game and on his way to the hospital. Bledsoe was a former #1 overall pick and had just been signed to the largest contract in NFL history. After a 5-11 season the year prior, the injury extinguished any hope left in New England. Sports Illustrated actually ranked the Patriots dead last in their weekly power rankings. Behind closed doors though, 6th-round quarterback Tom Brady had impressed Bill Belichick. Before the season, Brady had called his high school coach and told him that if he gets a chance at the starting job, then it will never be taken away from him. The next game in his first start, Brady outplayed Peyton Manning in a blowout win over the Colts. By week 10, Bledsoe was cleared to play, but Belichick was going with the quarterback who gave them the best chance to win every week. And that player wasn't the old face of the franchise, it was the new one. Despite the Patriots' skill positions lacking firepower, Brady was named to the Pro Bowl and led the Patriots to the playoffs after going 11-3 in games he started. Meanwhile, the Colts were struggling under the direction of Jim Mora, who delivered a rant for the ages that year.
Playoffs? Don't talk about it. Playoffs? You kidding me? Playoffs? I just hope we can win a game.
The Giants took a big step back, but Michael Strahan went on a tear to break the league's single-season sack record and be named the Defensive Player of the Year. A notorious game came in December with the Browns chasing a playoff spot and hosting the Jaguars. The officials decided to overturn a 4th down conversion from 2 plays earlier to effectively give Jacksonville the win. As a result, incensed Browns fans littered the field with bottles and trash, and the refs called the game. Over 20 minutes later, the league office called and said they actually had to finish the game. All in all, an absolute circus and embarrassing scene. Anyway, the greatest show on turf returned in dominating fashion, this time with a legitimate defense. Lovie Smith was brought in to improve that side of the ball, and the team acquired Hall of Fame defensive back Aeneas Williams. Kurt Warner won NFL MVP to make it 3 straight MVPs for the Rams. Torrey Holt and Isaac Bruce each eclipsed the 1,000-yard mark yet again. St. Louis went 14-2 as they look like the best team in football, bar none. In their first playoff game, Williams double-dipped on Brett Favre pick-sixes in a blowout win. The NFC Championship would prove more difficult. Brian Dawkins led a fearsome Eagles defense, and on the other side, quarterback Donovan McNabb, plus offensive guru Andy Reid. Despite Philadelphia leading at the half, Marshall Faulk's heroic effort was too much to handle as the Rams advanced to their 2nd Super Bowl in 3 years. Over in the AFC, serious drama took place. The Raiders paid a visit to Foxborough in the midst of a blizzard. This team was championship caliber. Owner Al Davis paired up an otherworldly receiving duo of Jerry Rice and Tim Brown with quarterback Rich Gannon and young head coach John Gruden to form an outstanding offense. Through 3 quarters of the divisional, Oakland had built a 10-point lead. Brady then ran in a touchdown to bring the Patriots within 3. Late in the 4th, the Patriots were driving, still down 3. Hall of Fame corner Charles Woodson blitzed and appeared to force a fumble. The refs then reviewed the call and said it was actually an incomplete pass. They applied the tuck rule, which essentially said the throwing motion doesn't end until the quarterback tucks the ball back against his body or raises the ball again. If the ball comes loose any time in between, it's an incomplete pass, not a fumble. So despite the bizarre rule, the incomplete ruling was the correct call. The intent of the player is irrelevant. So Brady continued the drive and set up Adam Vinatieri for an all-time snow kick. Then in overtime, Brady completed 8 consecutive passes for Vinatieri to hit the game winner. In the AFC Championship, the Patriots were 10-point underdogs to the Steelers. In the second quarter, New England was up 7-3 when Brady went down. Things came full circle for Bledsoe as he replaced Brady and did his part to maintain the lead. Troy Brown came in clutch on special teams, and Pro Bowl safety Lawyer Malloy sealed it with an interception off Cordell Stewart. With the Rams having 1 ring already on their finger and sitting as a 14-point favorite, wide receiver Ricky Prohl had a prediction.
Tonight, a dynasty is born, baby.
This game took place just 1 week after Conference Championship weekend. Brady was able to play despite battling a high ankle sprain. In a duel with Kurt Warner, turnovers would prove to be the key in this game. First half, Warner felt the pressure and Hall of Fame corner Ty Law took it all the way back. That would give the Patriots a 7-3 lead. Before the half, safety Antoine Harris popped the ball out of Ricky Proehl's hands to force a fumble. Brady then drove the team down the field and finished the drive with a fade to David Patton. At the half, the Patriots were up 14-3. Eventually, Warner turned it on with 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. With the score tied, the Patriots got the ball back with a minute 21 left. They had no timeouts and the ball was on the 17. John Madden said New England should just take a knee and play for overtime. Brady then methodically picked apart the Rams, going 53 yards and setting up a potential game-winning field goal.
I'll tell you, what Tom Brady just did gives me goosebumps.
Now the game fell on the foot of Adam Vinatieri. A 48-yard field goal could win it.
Set to go, snap ball down, kick up, kick is on the way, and it is good! It's good! It's good! Adam Vinatieri booms a 48-yard field goal, and the game is over, and the Patriots are Super Bowl champions!
Just like that, the Cinderella Patriots had won their first championship. New England's defense did well to slow down the greatest show on turf. Defensive end Willie McGinnis in particular delivered consistent pressure on Warner and Falk. Tragically, Patriots quarterbacks coach Dick Rabine, the man who told the team to draft their new star, had passed away before the 2001 season. Brady was named Super Bowl MVP and became the youngest quarterback to ever win a Super Bowl. Even so, it didn't take long for Brady to move on from that game, with him soon after famously saying, "My favorite ring is the next one." In 2002, the Houston Texans were introduced as the NFL expanded to 32 teams. The Texans were given the first pick in the NFL draft and used it to select quarterback David Carr. The expansion also produced division realignment and a new scheduling formula. In the AFC East, an in-division trade took place when the Patriots sent Drew Bledsoe to the Bills. Tom Brady took another step forward that year as he led the league in touchdowns. But Bledsoe certainly played well as a newcomer in Buffalo. The Jets claimed the division on a tiebreaker, much in part to the breakout of quarterback Chad Pennington. However, the lasting image of their season would no doubt be Herm Edwards' famous press conference.
Hello? You play to win the game.
Around the league, several records were broken. Jerry Rice surpassed Walter Payton for the all-time scrimmage yards record. Emmitt Smith broke Payton's all-time rushing yards record. And Marvin Harrison smashed the season receptions mark. The Colts went 10-6 with an improved defense under head coach Tony Dungy, but were blanked 41-0 by the Jets in the wild card round. In the divisional, the Jets were set to face the Raiders. During the offseason, Al Davis sent John Gruden to the Bucs for a stockpile of valuable draft picks and $8 million. A few weeks after the trade, offensive coordinator Bill Callahan was promoted to head coach in Oakland. In a way, this was the perfect time to take things over. Gruden's system had been fully implemented, they had the right players for the scheme, and they were overflowing with talent. Rich Gannon was named NFL MVP while playing behind one of the best O-lines in the league. Jerry Rice, at the age of 40, produced a 1,200-yard season. On the other side of the ball, you had a top 10 defense led by Rod Woodson and Charles Woodson. This time, with a trip to the AFC Championship on the line yet again, the Raiders left no doubt. The Titans were also back in the mix after squeaking by the Steelers. Sadly for Tennessee, though, Gannon dished out 3 touchdowns in the title game, and the Raiders were headed to their 5th Super Bowl appearance. As Callahan found immediate success in Oakland, so did Gruden in Tampa. This Bucs team was also peaking at the right time. Tony Dungy's Tampa 2 defense would soon become the most popular defensive scheme in the NFL. Based on the steel curtain defense, Tampa 2 limits big plays with 2 deep safeties and a deep middle linebacker on passing downs. The corners press and ideally quick linemen attack the quarterback. There's a beautiful simplicity to it that allows players to focus on exactly what they need to do. And the guys running this theme for the Bucks? You had multiple first-team All-Pros in Simeon Rice and Hall of Famer Warren Sapp. Next, you had an unreal linebacker in Derek Brooks. And in the secondary, how about Rondé Barber and John Lynch? In total, 4 players on this defense have made the Hall of Fame. A ridiculous number that proves just how remarkable this unit was, especially when it came to defending the pass. The Bucks had a first-round bye and would ultimately face the winner of a 49ers-Giants wildcard matchup. In that game, quarterback Jeff Garcia and Terrell Owens led a stunning 25-point comeback to keep their season alive. Against the Bucks, though, there would be no comeback, as Tampa pulled ahead early and never faltered. The Eagles made it back to the NFC Championship after shutting down Michael Vick's Falcons. This one was tight for a bit, but eventually quarterback Brad Johnson, who was coming off his best season, hooked up with Keyshawn Johnson to take the lead. And at the end, Rondé Barber capped it off with a pick 6. Raiders Bucks, aka the Pirate Bowl, or if you prefer the narrative-driven name, the Gruden Bowl. John Gruden's old team against his new team. And the Gruden factor would prove to be the X factor, as the Raiders hadn't changed their old audibles. So the Bucks defense could predict certain plays at the line. After a series of field goals to begin the game, Bucks fullback Mike Allstott crashed into the end zone. That gave Tampa a 13-3 lead. Right before half, Brad Johnson hit a spinning Keenan McCardell back shoulder to extend the lead. In the third, Johnson would find McCardell yet again, and the Bucks defense got in on the scoring as Dwight Smith took one back. To close things out, Derek Brooks joined the fun, and as the grand finale, Dwight Smith added another, just for good measure. In total, the Bucks intercepted Gannon 5 times, including 3 that were returned for touchdowns. A sensational performance that inked Tampa in the history books as one of the best defenses ever. Dexter Jackson was named MVP as he owned 2 of those interceptions, with both coming in the first half while the game was still close. At the end of the day, John Gruden came out on top against his old team and became the youngest head coach at the age of 39 to win a Super Bowl at that point in time. The Bucks, after a long history of irrelevance, took the national stage and stole the show. In 2003, Bill Belichick continued to prioritize his defense, as he added linebacker Roosevelt Colvin and former first-team All-Pros Ted Washington and Rodney Harrison. Right before the season, the team surprisingly released team captain Lawyer Malloy, signaling that Harrison would be the man at strong safety going forward. Ty Law and Richard Seymour continued to lead the unit, but Harrison was more than just a welcome addition. Although the offense lacked in the weapons department, Tom Brady garnered votes for NFL MVP. New England ripped through their schedule, going 14-2, including a 38-34 frenzy over the Colts, as the Brady-Manning rivalry heated up. In the AFC South, Manning and Steve McNair shared MVP honors. Manning and the Colts got off to a hot start, with the high point of their regular season coming against the Bucks. Down 21 with under 4 minutes to play, Indy produced 3 straight TDs to send the game into overtime. Then in OT, it came down to a Mike Vanderjagt field goal. Although the ball was tipped, it still found its way to bonk off an upright and go through. For McNair and the Titans, they tied the Colts at 12-4. McNair battled injuries in the second half of the season, which hindered his dual-threat ability, but he still had his best year in the league, in large part due to his dramatic improvement as a pocket passer. Chiefs running back Priest Holmes broke Emmitt Smith's season touchdown record with 27 on the year. 2 of the most famous games in 2003 came on back-to-back days. First came the Saints chasing a playoff spot and facing the eliminated Jaguars. Jacksonville had built a 7-point lead, and the Saints needed a miracle with just 7 seconds left.
Back to McAllister. Still alive. And they got it. Jerome Pathon with the catch. And he dives into the end zone for the touchdown.
There was no band on the field, but the Saints had pulled off the miracle. That is, until kicker John Carney missed the extra point. On that same Sunday, Brett Favre's father passed away. The Packers had a Monday Night Football game lined up, and Favre, along with his family, decided that his father would have wanted him to play. In the first half, he threw 4 touchdowns in a storybook performance, and the Packers won 41-7. In Green Bay's opening game of the playoffs, a back-and-forth contest sent the game into overtime. After winning the coin toss, Matt Hasselbeck famously said, "We want the ball and we're gonna score." Of course, Hasselbeck did score, but for the other team, as Al Harris took a walk-off pick 6 into the end zone. The Packers then squared off against the Eagles, where they gave up a 4th and 26 conversion late that ended up costing them the game. Philly then advanced to its 3rd straight conference championship under Andy Reid. They'd be tasked with facing the surprise of the year, the Carolina Panthers. Head coach John Fox had this team turned around after going 1-15 just 2 years prior. The central piece to this group was a terrifying D-line. On one side, you had Mike Rucker, who racked up 12 sacks on the year. Then on the other side was legendary defensive end Julius Peppers. On the interior, first-team All-Pro Chris Jenkins could get into the backfield as well. Over the course of the season, Carolina won 4 road games in overtime, and for that, they were nicknamed the Cardiac Cats. Before the playoffs began, linebackers coach Sam Mills delivered a passionate speech coming from his experience actively fighting cancer. He told the team they had 2 options: quit or keep pounding. From there, the Panthers took down the Cowboys, then etched the Cardiac Cats nickname into stone after a double overtime thriller that ended with a Jake Delhomme, Steve Smith walk-off touchdown. In the NFC Championship, Panthers corner Ricky Manning intercepted Donovan McNabb 3 times. The defense held the Eagles to just 3 points, and that vaulted them into their first ever Super Bowl. In the AFC, the Titans faced a stout Ravens team featuring Ray Lewis coming off another Defensive Player of the Year win, and 2,000-yard rusher Jamal Lewis. Tennessee held Lewis to just 35 yards and won off a last-minute Gary Anderson field goal. In the next round, the Titans traveled to frigid Foxborough, but couldn't pull off the upset. New England advanced to the AFC Championship for another Brady Manning affair. Indy's offense looked immaculate versus the Chiefs in the divisional and were set for Peyton Manning's first conference championship. To open the game, Brady's pump fake to David Givens gave the Patriots the lead. And they wouldn't need much more than that, as Manning threw 4 interceptions. Ty Law caught 3 of those as the Patriots advanced to Super Bowl 38. In their 9th year as a franchise, the Panthers were seeking their first Super Bowl win. Meanwhile, the Patriots were looking to win their second in just 3 years. This game looked to be a defensive struggle as the first quarter went scoreless. It wasn't until minutes before halftime for Brady to find Deion Branch in the end zone. All of a sudden, the Panthers quickly responded with a Jake Delhomme bomb to Steve Smith. Brady then drove the Patriots back into the end zone in under a minute with a TD to David Givens. And after all that, the Panthers used the final seconds remaining to get a field goal. So at the halfway point, New England led 14-10. During the halftime show, Justin Timberlake yanked on Janet Jackson's costume, causing a nip slip. The controversy spawned one of the earliest viral internet videos, and fun fact, it contributed to the creation of YouTube about a year later. Anyway, the third quarter resembled the first, with both teams held scoreless, but the Patriots were on the verge to begin the fourth. This time, running back Antoine Smith extended the lead. Now the score was 21-10 Patriots. Carolina quickly responded as Deshaun Foster blasted through for a TD. Then Delhomme launched one for an 85-yard Muhsin Muhammad score. That gave the Panthers a 22-21 lead. Brady answered yet again, hitting linebacker turned goal line tight end Mike Vrabel to retake the lead. After a Kevin Falk 2-point conversion, the Patriots led 29-22. The scoring craze continued as Delhomme lobbed one for Ricky Prohl. That would tie the game at 29 apiece. Just like the previous Patriots Super Bowl, it was up to Tom Brady to get the team into field goal range with just over a minute left. And he did just that with 5 straight clutch completions to get the ball down to the Carolina 23. Yet again, the game would come down to kicker Adam Vinatieri.
Snap, ball down, kick up, kick is on the way, kick is good! Kick is good! Adam Vinatieri from 41 yards away! 32-29!
The Patriots had won their second championship in 3 years. Tom Brady won Super Bowl MVP with 3 touchdowns and over 350 yards passing. New England, once a league bottom feeder, had now become the NFL's team to beat. In 2004, former Cardinals safety Pat Tillman, who ended his promising NFL career early to join the Army, tragically died in a friendly fire incident. Other offseason news involved a new rule emphasis. The NFL's passing numbers were at its lowest point in 11 years. Colts Hall of Fame GM Bill Polian, among others, lobbied for the emphasis to strictly enforce the illegal contact penalty that was last updated in 1994. In the draft, the Chargers traded number 1 overall pick Eli Manning to the Giants. Eli came into the league with immense pressure as the son of former Pro Bowl quarterback Archie Manning and the younger brother of Peyton. The Chargers, meanwhile, opted for quarterback Phillip Rivers with the number 4 pick. Soon after, the Steelers selected Ben Roethlisberger as the 3rd quarterback off the board. That pick immediately paid dividends as Roethlisberger won Rookie of the Year. Pittsburgh also went 15-1 with the league's number 1 defense. This unit was littered with all-pros. Linebackers James Ferrier, Joey Porter, and safety Troy Polamalu. The Steelers also carried maybe the 2 most impressive wins of the year, beating the undefeated Patriots, who had gone on an NFL record 21-game win streak dating back to the previous year, as well as taking down the 7-0 Eagles. New England finished the season right behind Pittsburgh at 14-2, with the exception of Ty Law going down with an injury. This team looked better than the previous year. The acquisition of running back Corey Dillon drastically improved the Patriots' disappointing rushing attack. The Eagles also brought in offseason improvements. Terrell Owens ended his successful yet drama-filled time with the 49ers. He joined Philly and helped Donovan McNabb enjoy the best season of his career. The team also revamped its defense with former All-Pro defensive end Javon Curse and linebacker Jeremiah Trotter, who originally started his career in Philadelphia. That helped form an elite Eagles defense with Brian Dawkins leading the way, along with a career year out of corner Lito Shepherd. In the playoffs, the Eagles were missing Owens, but still had an easy time with the Vikings to advance to their 4th straight NFC championship. In that game against the Falcons, the Eagles finally got over the hump as the defense shut down dynamic dual threat Michael Vick. In the AFC, the Patriots opened their quest for a repeat against the Colts. This season, Peyton Manning broke Dan Marino's season passing touchdown record with 49 TDs. To this day, it remains one of the best passing seasons of all time. But in this divisional matchup, the Colts failed to score a touchdown. On the other side of the bracket, the Steelers' overtime win over the Jets propelled them to the AFC Championship. The night before that game, Brady came down with a 103-degree fever. You wouldn't have known it though, as Brady rocketed a 60-yarder to Deion Branch in the first, and the Patriots would win with ease, 41-27. In their second Super Bowl appearance, the Eagles were searching for their first franchise win, whereas the Patriots, of course, were hoping to make it 3 out of 4. Something only the Cowboys had ever done. The biggest story before the game was the miracle return of Terrell Owens, who had just broken his fibula 7 weeks prior. Against the advice of doctors and putting his career in jeopardy, Owens decided to play. Right off the bat, McNabb threw to Owens for Philly's first gain. But the Patriots' defense did well to slow down the attack early on, with Rodney Harrison grabbing a red zone interception. Later in the first half, McNabb opened the door with a touchdown to L.J. Smith. The Patriots would respond before halftime as Brady found David Givens on the edge of the end zone. To open the third quarter, Brady continually looked for Deion Branch to get the team into scoring range. He then tossed one for Mike Vrabel, who bobbled it but still managed to reel it in. That gave the Patriots a 14-7 lead. McNabb then countered with a fadeaway strike to Brian Westbrook. Once again, the score was tied. But in the fourth quarter, Corey Dillon lunged past the goal line to retake the lead. Adam Vinatieri would tack on a field goal for a 10-point New England advantage. With under 2 minutes to play, McNabb put it right where Greg Lewis needed it to bring the Eagles within 3. But the Patriots held on to seal their legacy as a dynasty. Deion Branch caught 11 balls for 133 yards and was awarded Super Bowl MVP. On the other side, Terrell Owens put up one of the most astonishing performances in Super Bowl history, given his injury situation, catching 9 passes for 122 yards. All things considered, this Patriots team was the best one yet. And at such a young age, Brady had joined the likes of Terry Bradshaw, Joe Montana, and Troy Aikman as the only quarterbacks to win 3 Super Bowls. Meanwhile, Belichick joined Chuck Noll, Bill Walsh, and Joe Gibbs as the only head coaches to win 3. In the 2005 offseason, there was big news in the receiver department. The Vikings sent star receiver Randy Moss to the Raiders. Minnesota was operating under a small budget, and there were rumors that Moss's personality no longer meshed well with the team. In Oakland, he was sort of a replacement for another legend. Jerry Rice was traded to the Seahawks midseason in 2004, then spent the 2005 offseason in Denver before he retired. With 20 years in the league, he owns almost every career receiving record there is, and is considered the greatest receiver to ever play. In TV news, the NFL debuted the Red Zone channel on DirecTV, changing the way fans watch while jumping from game to game with no commercials. Due to the devastation left behind by Hurricane Katrina, the Saints were forced to play their home games in San Antonio and Baton Rouge. The Cardinals and 49ers played a game in Mexico City for the first regular season NFL game held outside the United States. After drawing a record crowd, the NFL would continue to test the waters internationally. Panthers receiver Steve Smith became the first since Sterling Sharp in 1992 to seize the receiving Triple Crown. Meanwhile, Seahawks running back Shaun Alexander broke the season touchdown record on his way to an MVP award. Seattle had an elite offensive line that featured Hall of Famers Walter Jones and Steve Hutchinson. Plus, Matt Hasselbeck produced one of the best years in his career. In the playoffs, Seattle secured their first playoff win in 21 years over the Redskins. In the NFC Championship, they lined up against a Panthers team who had made the Super Bowl just 2 years prior. Regardless, the Seahawks built an early lead, starting with a Hasselbeck to Jeremy Stevens TD. Shaun Alexander would add 2 scores of his own to send Seattle on through. In the AFC, the Patriots took a step back this year. Ty Law was released in the offseason. The heart and soul of the defense, linebacker Teddy Bruschi, missed part of the season while recovering from a stroke. And Rodney Harrison suffered a season-ending injury. Still, Tom Brady led the league in passing yards, and the Pats pummeled the Jaguars in the wild card round. But there would be no three-peat as Mike Shanahan and Champ Bailey handed Brady his first playoff loss in Denver. In the other divisional matchup, the Colts hosted the Steelers. Pittsburgh wasn't quite as dominant compared to the previous season. When they faced the Colts in Week 12, the Hall of Fame pairing of Edgerrin James and Marvin Harrison was too much to handle. Big picture though, the Steelers still had an elite defense. And their offense with Roethlisberger and leading rusher Willie Parker could get the job done as well. In this playoff meeting, it looked like the Steelers had the game wrapped up late. All they had to do was get the ball in the end zone with sure bet goal line back Jerome Bettis. But remarkably, linebacker Gary Brackett popped the ball loose, and it seemed as though Nick Harper would return it all the way, but Big Ben made the shoestring tackle. Colts kicker Mike Vanderjagt then missed a 46-yard game-tying attempt, and the Steelers became the first 6 seed to take down a 1 seed. In the AFC Championship, Roethlisberger totaled 3 touchdowns, and the Pittsburgh defense forced 4 turnovers off Broncos quarterback Jake Plummer. That dominating effort sent the Steelers to their 6th Super Bowl appearance. Super Bowl 40. On one end, the Seahawks are dreaming of their first ring, while the Steelers were looking to get one for the thumb. On the coaching side of things, Mike Holmgren previously won it all with the Packers, whereas Bill Cowher was searching for his first. In the opening quarter, Matt Hasselbeck looked like he had Darrell Jackson for the game's first score, but the play was called back for pass interference. Ultimately, the Seahawks settled for a field goal. Before halftime, Roethlisberger faked the handoff to Bettis and dove for the goal line. The official originally ruled he was down, but quickly changed his call to touchdown. So at the half, the Steelers led 7-3. To open the third, Willie Parker burst forward for the longest touchdown run in Super Bowl history. The Seahawks missed a field goal, but then forced a big turnover, courtesy of Kelly Herndon. As a result, Hasselbeck found an open Jeremy Stevens, and that brought the Seahawks within 3. In the fourth, Pittsburgh ran an end around, and Antoine Randall delivered a beauty to Hines Ward. That trick play would cap off a 21-10 victory, as the Steelers tied the Cowboys and 49ers for the most Super Bowl wins. Hines Ward was named the game's MVP, and Big Ben usurped Brady as the youngest QB to win the Super Bowl. Bill Cowher finally reached the mountaintop in his 14th season as Steelers head coach, and lastly, Jerome Bettis ended his career as a winner in his hometown of Detroit. In 2006, Paul Tagliabue retired and handed the keys to the league over to Roger Goodell. NBC took over Sunday Night Football from ESPN, and it quickly overtook Monday Night Football as the NFL's premier broadcast. The Saints returned to New Orleans along with some new faces. At head coach, Sean Payton. At running back, Heisman winner Reggie Bush. And at quarterback, Drew Brees. Brees had some success in San Diego, but with a shoulder injury and the Chargers having Phillip Rivers, the two sides couldn't agree on a contract. In Week 3, the Saints had a triumphant return in their first home game. On the very first drive, safety Steve Gleason blocked a punt in iconic fashion for the first score of the game. That block would symbolize the rebirth of New Orleans and has since been sculpted into a statue. A few weeks after that, the undefeated Bears visited the hapless Cardinals on Monday night. This Bears team was led by a front seven starring D-tackle Tommy Harris, linebacker duo Lance Briggs and Hall of Famer Brian Urlacher, as well as a great secondary with the spotlight on Charles Peanut Tillman. For special teams, Chicago carried one of the best units ever, headlined by all-world return man Devin Hester. In the first half of this game, though, the Bears offense turned the ball over a number of times and Arizona jumped out to a 20-0 lead. But the defense would resurrect Chicago late in the game. An Urlacher strip and Tillman fumble return brought the Bears within 6. And then a Devin Hester punt return topped off the improbable comeback. After the game, Cardinals head coach Dennis Green gave the world an incredible soundbite.
But they are who we thought they were, and we let them off the hook.
Thanks, Coach.
In Phillip Rivers' first season heading the Chargers, San Diego went 14-2. Running back LaDainian Tomlinson reset the season touchdown record with 31 as he marched toward NFL MVP. Tight end Antonio Gates and all-star blocking fullback Lorenzo Neal rounded this offense into number 1 in the league. As the NFL playoffs kicked into gear, so did the sales of the newly released Nintendo Wii. The Patriots began their postseason with a demolition of the Jets. After that, they traveled to San Diego as an underdog. New England had a tough time with the Chargers' running game early on, but San Diego had some back-breaking turnovers to keep the Patriots in the game. In the end, a clutch throw from Brady to Rashae Caldwell set up the game-winning score. And after a historic season, the Chargers would go down in painful fashion. Elsewhere in the AFC, Peyton Manning ran into his arch-nemesis Ty Law on the Chiefs. Although Law reeled in 2 interceptions, the Colts otherwise dominated. In the divisional against the Ravens, offseason acquisition Adam Vinatieri scored all of the Colts' points. And that would be enough in a 15-6 win where Indy's defense came up big. So for the third time in 4 years, the AFC Championship would be a battle between Brady and Manning. In some ways, both the Colts and Patriots weren't as strong as previous iterations. New England had a bottom-tier receiving core, with Caldwell being the team's top receiver, plus Willie McGinnis and Vinatieri were cap casualties. For Indy, their Hall of Fame trio was broken up after Edgerrin James left for the Cardinals, and their defense wasn't nearly as strong as the top-tier unit they carried in 2005. Still, these two teams were in the conference title game for a reason. In the first half, it didn't take long for the Patriots to build a 21-3 lead, but the Colts kept chipping away and eventually tied it up. Now with the score tied at 21, the Patriots had to respond. And they did, with Brady avoiding the rush and pinpointing Jabbar Gaffney in the air. At the beginning of the fourth, the Colts were driving toward the end zone. Dominique Rhodes fumbled the ball, but center Jeff Saturday recovered it over the line. So the score was tied yet again, going back to the Pats. On that drive, Caldwell dropped his second crucial catch of the day, and the Patriots were forced to settle for a field goal. Ultimately, the Colts punched one in with Joseph Adai to win it. It took 38 points, but the Colts finally topped the Patriots. And Peyton Manning was headed to his first Super Bowl. In the NFC playoffs, the Bears faced the Seahawks in the divisional. Seattle had just advanced after an infamous botched hold by Cowboys quarterback Tony Romo. In this tight matchup, Bears All-Pro kicker Robbie Gould knocked down a 41-yarder in overtime to win it. Their opposition for the NFC Championship would be the Rebirth Saints. Although this game remained close through 3 quarters, the gates opened for the Bears in the fourth. So behind a stellar performance from the defense and running back Thomas Jones, Chicago broke through to its first Super Bowl since the 1985 season. On a rainy day in Miami, legacies were on the line. Questions had bubbled over whether Peyton Manning and Tony Dungy could win the big one after several years of regular season success ending in playoff disappointment. For the Bears, inconsistent quarterback Rex Grossman was a serious concern, but the hope was they could pull off a 2000 Ravens-type outcome. On the opening kickoff, Devin Hester did exactly what the Colts feared, taking it to the house for a 7-0 Bears lead. Eventually, the Colts responded with a wide-open Reggie Wayne going 53 yards for the score. With a botched hold on the extra point, though, the Bears still led by 1. On Chicago's next drive, Grossman threaded it to Muhsin Muhammad. With an 8-point lead and the Bears' defense already forcing 2 turnovers, it looked as though an upset was brewing. After a Colts punt on the ensuing drive, All-Pro safety Bob Sanders forced a Bears fumble, and All-Decade defensive end Dwight Freeney recovered it. Indy then kicked off the second quarter with an Adam Vinatieri field goal and a Dominique Rhodes plunge to take the lead. At the half, the Colts led 16-14. Prince then performed Purple Rain in the Rain, which instantly became an iconic halftime act. In the second half, the Colts defense put the clamps on a messy Bears offense. A field goal fest took place in the third with the Colts hanging on to the lead. And in the fourth, corner Kelvin Hayden picked off Grossman for the only touchdown of the second half. So Indy's defense outscored Chicago's offense in the final 30 minutes. In total, they forced 5 turnovers to clinch the win. After so many playoff heartbreaks going back to his time with the Bucs, Tony Dungy could finally raise that trophy, and Peyton Manning had weathered the storm. Years of pressure with no payoff had built up, but it finally culminated into a Super Bowl MVP. In the 2007 NFL Draft, the Raiders selected quarterback Jamarcus Russell with the #1 overall pick. At one point, Oakland didn't believe Russell was doing his homework, so they sent him home with blank tape. The next day, they asked him what he thought of certain plays on the tape, and it became clear he didn't know the tape was actually blank. That set the course for one of the biggest draft busts ever. But for now, the 2007 offseason fixated on Michael Vick, as he faced charges for running a barbaric dogfighting ring. Later in the year, he was sentenced to 23 months in prison. The Falcons had lost their franchise quarterback, and Vick disgraced himself as well as the NFL. In late November, Redskins Pro Bowl safety Sean Taylor was murdered during a botched burglary at his home. To pay respect, head coach Joe Gibbs lined up with 10 men on the field to begin their next game. In New England, if they wanted to be back on top over the Colts, they needed to reevaluate the receiver position. When you compare the two offenses, Manning played with Marvin Harrison, who had an argument for being the best receiver in the league, plus an eventual first-team All-Pro in Reggie Wayne. Meanwhile, in Brady's career, he'd been surrounded by Troy Brown, Deion Branch, David Givens, and Rashae Caldwell. Although that group had their fair share of big moments, combined they only had one 1,000-yard season in their careers. In 2006, it was obvious the group was remarkably insufficient. So the Patriots traded for Dolphins number 3 receiver Wes Welker, a slot guy with special teams value, then in a headline-generating move, exchanged a 4th-round pick for Randy Moss. At the time, Raiders Moss was seen as damaged goods. In 2006, he had just 553 yards and 3 touchdowns. A far cry from his all-pro days in Minnesota. Right off the bat, this new-look offense dropped 38 points in each of its first 3 games. Brady threw for 10 touchdowns, with 5 of them going to his new favorite target. The Randy Moss resurgence was on, and suddenly Welker blossomed into one of the league's most productive slot receivers. By week 9, the Patriots had beaten every opponent by at least 17 points and were set to face off against the undefeated Colts. Historically, it was the best regular season matchup ever, and as a result, it was dubbed Super Bowl 41.5. In that game, Brady engineered a 4th-quarter comeback in a 3-touchdown performance. New England went on to win its next 6 games, setting up a grand finale against the Giants with the record books on their mind. New York had already clinched a wildcard spot, which exceeded expectations for a team under fire before the 2007 season. Both head coach Tom Coughlin and quarterback Eli Manning received their fair share of criticism and consequently had their futures with the team held in doubt. Coughlin hired 2 new coordinators and was given a 1-year extension, which is typically seen as a telltale sign of a lame duck head coach. After an 0-2 start to the season, the Giants made an iconic goal line stand. A major turning point in the season as New York won 10 out of its next 13 games. The Giants started this much-anticipated finale off well, but Brady and Moss struck early in the second with a touchdown of historical significance. Brady tied Peyton Manning for the passing touchdown record at 49, and Moss tied Jerry Rice for the receiving touchdown record at 22. The back-and-forth action continued through the first half with the Giants leading 21-16. On New York's first drive of the third, Eli rolled out and hit Plexico Burress to give the Patriots their largest deficit all season. New England got the ball back and quickly scored with Lawrence Maroney. Now the Giants only led by 5. Then early in the fourth, Brady rainbowed one to Moss for a 65-yard score. And that one would break both the passing and receiving touchdown records. The Giants came close with a fearless performance from Eli, but in the end, 16-0 had been achieved. New England became the only team to ever go 16-0 in the regular season, and they joined the 1972 Dolphins as the only undefeated teams in the modern era. Not only did the Patriots break the points record that year, but they scored 134 more points than the next closest team. Their average result had them winning 37-17, and to this day they have the highest point differential in history. Brady had one of the greatest passing seasons ever. In addition to being the first quarterback to ever hit 50 touchdowns in a season, he also set a new mark for a touchdown-to-interception ratio in a season. To open the playoffs, Brady went 26 of 28 with 3 TDs against Jacksonville, breaking the completion percentage record in a game with at least 20 attempts. Despite many believing a Brady-Manning AFC championship was a lock, it was the Chargers who took down the Colts to progress to the title game. Earlier that year, the Patriots wreaked havoc on the San Diego defense. In this game, Brady played through a high ankle sprain, and the matchup was much closer, but still it seemed like nothing could stop the 19-0 destiny. And the Patriots advanced to their 4th Super Bowl in 7 years. In the NFC, the Giants got the ball rolling with a win over Gruden's Bucks. The divisional game would be a tougher test, as the top-seeded Cowboys handed New York 2 losses already that year. More specifically, Terrell Owens in his second year as a Cowboy shredded the Giants' defense. In this matchup, although Owens scored early, the defense limited him otherwise. Eli played turnover-free ball and Brandon Jacobs blasted through for the game winner. So for a 3rd straight playoff game, the Giants would travel as an away team. The stage was set for Lambeau Field in one of the coldest games in history. This season, Brett Favre had a late career resurgence to lead Green Bay to 13-3. He also broke Dan Marino's records for career passing yards and touchdowns, as well as John Elway's QB wins record. The NFC Championship began with a pair of Giants field goals. Then Packers receiver Donald Driver escaped the New York secondary and scored. At the half, Green Bay led 10-6. In the third, Brandon Jacobs gave the Giants their first taste of the end zone and a 3-point lead. But Brett Favre replied, this time with Donald Lee wide open for the score. Eli immediately responded, getting the ball downfield and finishing the drive with Ahmad Bradshaw. The Packers answered back with a game-tying field goal. Then with 4 seconds left, Giants kicker Lawrence Tynes lined up for a game winner.
For the win. Snap is high, Beagles gets it down, kick a line drive, and it is no good!
With that brutal miss, the score was tied 20 apiece at the end of regulation. The Packers won the toss, but it didn't take long for corner Corey Webster to pick off Favre. That set the Giants up for another field goal to potentially send them to the Super Bowl.
To kick the Giants to the Super Bowl. Snap is good, kick on its way, end over end, does it have the distance? It is good! Lawrence Tynes has kicked the Giants to the Super Bowl!
The Patriots were just 60 minutes away from 19-0 and going down as the greatest team to ever play. The Giants were a 12.5-point underdog, but they also had won 10 in a row away from home. Plus, in their minds, New England barely beat them last time out. They knew they could compete, especially because they found a few cracks in the Patriots' protection scheme the last time they played. Coughlin's plan on offense was eerily similar to Bill Parcells' strategy in Super Bowl 25. Run the ball effectively to produce long, drawn-out drives and keep the opposing powerful offense off the field. Back then, Coughlin was the Giants' receivers coach and Bill Belichick was the defensive coordinator. In the first quarter, the Giants opened the game with a record 9-minute, 59-second, 16-play drive that ended in a field goal. Right away, the game plan was going even better than expected. Now, the Patriots would score a touchdown on their first drive with Lawrence Maroney, but it soon became clear that this would be no shootout like Week 17. After leading the league in sacks, the Giants utilized what would later become known as the NASCAR package, subbing out larger defensive tackles and sending additional speedy defensive ends in the game at once. The Patriots' O-line just couldn't compete with the speed. All night long, the Giants got pressure up the middle, typically rushing just 4 players and having the luxury to drop everyone else back into coverage. Justin Tuck, Michael Strahan, and Osi Umenyiora were unrelenting, hitting Brady with every chance they had. To make matters worse for New England, their running game was virtually non-existent. Yet at the half, they still led by 4. In the third quarter, the Patriots failed to convert on a 4th and 13 after Belichick opted out of kicking a 49-yard field goal. Minutes into the fourth, Eli found David Tyree in the end zone to take the lead. Tyree had caught only 5 passes all year long, and the Friday before the Super Bowl, he had what Eli called the worst practice in the history of practices at any level. Still, similar to Week 17, the Patriots reclaimed the lead late with a Brady to Moss touchdown. The game was coming down to a 2-minute drill, and the ball was in Eli Manning's hands. With just a minute 20 left, Manning goes back to Tyree, but it's overthrown, and all-pro corner Asante Samuel can't quite handle it. Then, on the very next play, it happened.
He's in trouble. He's spun around. He's able to get away. Looks to throw. He does downfield, and a leaping catch is made down at the 25. What a play. David Tyree.
In that moment, with the pocket collapsing, Eli pulled a Houdini. Pair that up with the miracle helmet catch, and you have maybe the greatest play in NFL history. Less than a minute later, Eli lobbed one for Burris in the end zone. And that would be the game winner. It took a perfect game to ruin perfection and beat the best team of the Tom Brady era. And to further add to the storybook ending, that would be the final catch of Tyree's career. Tom Coughlin and defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo coached a near-perfect game, and after missing out on a ring at the start of the decade, Hall of Famer Michael Strahan would retire a champion. Eli was awarded Super Bowl MVP and had eliminated all doubts that he couldn't clinch one in the big-time moments. Along with incredible consistency from the defense, he led the Giants to maybe the most improbable Super Bowl run ever. After flirting with retirement for a couple years, Brett Favre decided to finally step away. The Packers had his replacement lined up with 2005 first-round pick Aaron Rodgers, who sat behind Favre for 3 years. In an effort to compete with the Patriots, the Jets made waves in the offseason, bringing in numerous free agents, including former Steelers Hall of Fame guard Alan Faneca and Pro Bowl fullback Tony Richardson. The cherry on top came when Favre unretired and New York jumped at the opportunity to trade for him. Despite the dramatic changes, the Jets finished 9-7 and missed the playoffs. For the Patriots, there would be no redemption for 18-1, as Bernard Pollard crashed into Tom Brady's knee, causing an ACL tear in Week 1. Although backup Matt Castle stepped in and played well, New England ultimately fell short of the playoffs. The Dolphins surprised the league, successfully deploying a wildcat package rarely seen in the pros. Along with the efforts of quarterback Chad Pennington, Miami jumped from 1-15 in 2007 to division winners in 2008. Chiefs' illustrious tight end Tony Gonzalez passed Shannon Sharp for the tight end receiving yards record. The previous year, he'd also broken Sharp's tight end touchdown record. In Week 17, with teams fighting for playoff honors, another team was fighting infamy. The Lions had lost every game of the season, and with one game left, could join the 1976 Bucs as the only team to go winless for a full season in the modern era. In the finale, the Packers dropped 31 on Detroit, and the Lions finished 0-16. Although the Colts didn't win their division, Peyton Manning reeled in another NFL MVP. Though in the wildcard round, Chargers running back Darren Sproles overpowered Indy's defense for an overtime win. The Steelers, possessing a league-best defense driven by Defensive Player of the Year James Harrison, then toppled San Diego in the divisional. For the conference title, they were set to butt heads with division rival Ravens. In many ways, these two teams were similar. The Ravens also constructed a top-tier defense, adding extraordinary safety Ed Reed and hard-hitting linebacker Terrell Suggs since their last Super Bowl win. Plus, they each had two head coaches in Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh with limited experience. Pittsburgh built an early lead in large part to Santonio Holmes' mad dash to the end zone, and Troy Polamalu delivered the dagger with a pick-six off rookie Joe Flacco. In the NFC, the Giants snagged the number 1 seed despite losing Michael Strahan to retirement, proving that last year was no fluke. However, unlike 2007, the team cooled off toward the end of the year, partially due to self-inflicted wounds, and the Eagles took them out in the divisional round. The Cardinals shocked the world with back-to-back playoff wins over the Falcons and Panthers. At several points over the last several years, Kurt Warner's career looked over after getting benched for younger options. But in 2008, he launched a late career revival alongside a trio of 1,000-yard receivers, including All-Pro Larry Fitzgerald and Anquan Boldin. Now, for the first time since 1947, the Cardinals hosted a playoff game, with it ironically being the NFC Championship. And they sure came to play, as Fitzgerald caught 3 touchdowns in the first half. Nonetheless, Donovan McNabb led a comeback with 3 straight TDs of his own. As the clock winded down in the fourth, the Eagles led 25-24. Warner then hit running back Tim Hightower on a screen, and he bounced off defenders into the end zone. That advanced the Cardinals to their first Super Bowl. Just like the rest of the country, Super Bowl 43 was impacted by the Great Recession. Some advertisers were forced to pull out, and the average ticket price wasn't up to par with previous years. Still, that had no effect on the excitement for this game. The Steelers were seeking their second ring in the Roethlisberger era, while the Cardinals were searching for their first title since 1947. Head coach Ken Wisenhunt knew his opposition quite well after serving as offensive coordinator for Pittsburgh's last championship run. Through one quarter, the Steelers led 3-0 and were on the verge of scoring again. Running back Gary Russell then ran up the gut to increase the lead. With a 10-point Pittsburgh advantage, Warner then responded with a big play downfield to Bugden. After that, he lobbed a play-action jump ball for tight end Ben Patrick, who cut the deficit to 3. Toward the end of the second quarter, Carlos Dansby came down with a deflected Roethlisberger pass. That set up the Cardinals to get into the red zone. Right before half, Warner looked for the slant, but James Harrison took it away, and all 240 pounds of him raced it back 100 yards for the touchdown. So at halftime, the Steelers led 17-7. It wasn't until the fourth quarter for the Cardinals to get things rolling again. Warner struck a fade to Fitzgerald to bring Arizona within 6. Then with about 3 minutes left in the game, the Steelers were backed up, and Arizona edge rusher Chike O'Keefer forced a safety, cutting the lead to 4. Cardinals got the ball back, and Fitzgerald took off for a 64-yard touchdown. That gave Arizona their first lead of the night. Big Ben then made a series of plays, and Santonio Holmes accelerated past a slipping defender. That set the Steelers up on the 6-yard line, down 4, with less than a minute to go.
Roethlisberger has time, throws to the back of the end zone, and it is caught for a touchdown by Holmes.
On first down, Roethlisberger actually missed Holmes in the opposite corner, but the pair made up for it with a pinpoint throw and acrobatic catch, a play that goes down in history as one of the greatest ever. Pittsburgh's defense clamped down in the remaining seconds, and Roethlisberger, along with a great defensive core, claimed their second ring. The victory left the Steelers franchise all alone at the top, with a record 6 Super Bowl wins. In less than 2 years into retirement, former NFL MVP Steve McNair was shockingly found dead alongside his mistress. Police eventually determined that it was the mistress who committed the horrifying act. Other news that summer involved Michael Vick, who was released from prison and eventually signed with the Eagles to back up Donovan McNabb. In the NFL draft, Lions fans finally had something to look forward to with the selection of franchise quarterback Matthew Stafford. In Week 1, Tom Brady returned from a torn ACL, but the highlight of his year came in a snow game when he threw a record 5 touchdowns in one quarter. The lowlight came when the Patriots lost to the Colts by mere inches on a controversial 4th and 2 call on their own 28. Titans running back Chris Johnson became just the second running back of the decade to hit 2,000 rushing yards. Even more impressively, he broke Marshall Faulk's record for yards from scrimmage. Brett Favre retired from the Jets, but eventually unretired yet again and joined up with the Vikings. Back in the NFC North, Favre took Minnesota to 12-4. And at the age of 40, he carried out the best touchdown-interception ratio in the league. At the same time, 23-year-old running back Adrian Peterson appeared to be the next great power back. Also, Favre's replacement in Aaron Rodgers wasn't far behind, with the Packers grabbing a wildcard spot. Green Bay then battled the Cardinals in the highest-scoring playoff game ever. Rodgers and Warner combined for 10 touchdowns, with the score tied 45 apiece at the end of regulation. In overtime, Michael Adams blitzed Rodgers to force a fumble, and Carlos Dansby took it in to end the game. Up next for the Cardinals would be the top-seeded Saints. New Orleans was coming off its best regular season in franchise history. Drew Brees had a serious argument for MVP, going 13-2 and leading the NFL in touchdowns and yards per attempt. Although the defense wasn't nearly as strong as the league's #1 offense, it still contained a few big playmakers, most notably being linebacker Jonathan Vilma and all-pro safety Darren Sharper. When the Cardinals came to town, the Saints locked in the win with 35 points in the first half. The Vikings also made the NFC Championship, with the Favre Dream renaissance continuing as he tossed 4 touchdowns in Minnesota's first playoff game. With a trip to the Super Bowl on the line, the Saints pummeled Favre all night. But this game was still knotted up 28-28 with under a minute left. The Vikings were getting close to field goal range when Tracy Porter picked off Favre to send the game into overtime. On the first possession, Breeze drove his team down the field to set up Garrett Hartley for the game winner.
Hartley sends the Saints to the Super Bowl.
In the AFC, the Colts and Chargers looked like the best teams. For Indy, Tony Dungy had retired and quarterbacks coach Jim Caldwell took over. Peyton Manning added yet another MVP to his storied career, and this time it would be without Marvin Harrison, who quietly retired in the offseason. Tight end Dallas Clark stepped up big time and was awarded a first-team All-Pro selection. The team began the year 14-0, then dropped the final 2 games as Caldwell opted to play his starters for only part of each game. In the Colts' first playoff game, the defense dominated the Ravens in a 20-3 win. In the other matchup, the Jets visited San Diego. Rex Ryan and All-Pro corner Darrelle Revis held the Chargers to 14 points in an upset win. As for the AFC Championship, the Jets once again looked capable of pulling off an upset, leading 17-13 at the half. Then New York failed to score in the second half while Manning took over, meaning the Sheriff was on his way to his second Super Bowl. Super Bowl 44 presented a fantastic quarterback matchup, Manning versus Breeze. Manning was in search of his second ring and would have to go through his father's old team to get it. Breeze not only had the pressure of his first appearance, but also the weight of a city still in recovery. After a Colts field goal in the first quarter, Manning added to the lead with a perfect ball to Pierre Garçon. In the second, New Orleans doubled up on field goals, but struggled in and around the red zone. Their best opportunity came on 4th and goal, where Pierre Thomas was stopped on the 1. So down 10-6 at the half, it was clear the Saints needed a spark.
Looking at every time he comes off the field. Onside kick to start the second half, and the ball bounces off the hands of the Colt, and it looks like the Saints had it for a second.
And maybe the gutsiest play call ever, Sean Payton called for the play known as ambush. All week, the Saints had rookie punter Thomas Morstead practice onside kicks. And in the big moment, safety Chris Reese recovered the ball in the scrum. On the ensuing drive, Breeze dumped it to Thomas, who then navigated his way into the end zone. Just like that, the Saints had their first lead of the game. Colts got the ball back, and Joseph Adai then spun his way into a touchdown. Before the fourth, the Saints kicked a field goal to pull within 1 point of Indy. Later, when Breeze got the ball back, he chipped away and finished the drive with a dart to Jeremy Shockey. After a Lance Moore 2-point conversion, the Saints led 24-17. Peyton Manning then started working it down the field, but Tracy Porter came through again, effectively putting an end to the game with a pick six. So just 4.5 years after Hurricane Katrina, the Saints marched their way to a Lombardi trophy. Drew Brees was named Super Bowl MVP, and Sean Payton would go down in history for the way he coached the season's biggest moment. If you would like to support me in doing this for every decade in NFL history, then you can of course subscribe to the channel. If you would like to take it a step further, then you can join my Patreon, or you can click/tap the Super Thanks button to donate directly on YouTube. As always, thanks for watching. And now we have the official NFL All-Decade team.